At her sister's military promotion dinner, Caroline Hayes sat quietly at the end of the table. They laughed over the steak she paid for, called her a nobody just before a Pentagon colonel walked in, and saluted her like the war had never ended. Before we dive in, where are you listening from right now? Drop it in the comments. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. Caroline Hayes sat stiffly at the long, linen-draped table, her black blazer tugging at the seams, refusing to close properly across her chest. The restaurant around her gleamed with polished cutlery and laughter softened by candlelight. Her family, gathered in celebration of her younger sister's promotion, looked as though the past 5 years of silence had never happened. They clinked glasses over steak she'd paid for, smiled with warmth that didn't quite reach their eyes. She held her fork too tightly, knuckles white, like it might deflect what she already knew was coming. It landed, clean between dessert and the second round of wine. Her father, retired Master Sergeant Edward Hayes, lifted his glass and said loudly enough for the next table to hear, "Here's to those who serve with honor and those who just serve their egos." Laughter rippled, not hearty awkward. Her sister Natalie smirked behind her champagne flute. Even her mother looked down at her plate, choosing a piece of asparagus over a daughter. Caroline didn't speak. She never did when it would only confirm their story that she no longer belonged. Her silence was met with silence, and that silence said everything. Then the restaurant door opened. A man entered, broad-shouldered, wearing dress blues that told a story in ribbons and pins. He scanned the room once, eyes passing over the polished wood and private uniforms, then locked onto Caroline. He walked straight toward her, not a glance at her father, not a nod to her sister, just a firm stride and a voice that rang out, clear as a bell. "General Hayes, ma'am, welcome back." Every conversation in the room died mid-sentence. Forks paused mid-air. Glasses hovered mid-toast. Her father's hand trembled just enough to spill a drop of red wine onto the white tablecloth. Natalie's smile collapsed. The light in her eyes flickered, like someone had flipped a switch too fast. They had buried Caroline before she ever left the battlefield, whispered about her, rewrote her story, and made her absence easier by pretending it meant she had failed. They thought they could silence her by erasing her name. But here she was, and someone had remembered. The crowd went still, the way a room does when it realizes it got the story wrong. Later that week, Caroline returned to the one place she never thought she would, her childhood home in Virginia. The lawn looked the same, slightly overcut, always damp from her mother's overwatering, but the air felt foreign, like the kind that lingers in houses kept too quiet for too long. No welcome signs, no embraces, just a Veterans Day potluck in the backyard and an old folding chair by the water cooler waiting for her. Her father had invited some former unit friends, men who wore their retirement caps like crowns, and a few neighbors who had once worn a uniform. Long ago, Natalie stood tall in her National Guard blues, medals polished, posture perfect, 4 years in uniform, and you'd think she'd commanded an air base. Caroline, by contrast, had no seat assigned. Aunt Helen offered a tight-lipped smile and pointed to the auxiliary table in the far corner. "Sweetheart, that spot's reserved for Lieutenant Hayes. Would you mind sliding over? No surprise." Caroline nodded and said nothing, and sat by the water dispenser, near the trays of cold pasta and forgotten side salads. Against the fence, a photo display stretched across a folding board, her father in Vietnam, Grandpa Hayes in World War II, Natalie at basic training graduation. She waited for her own photo to appear, the one she had once sent from West Point, back straight, eyes proud, commission papers in hand. It wasn't there. Instead, in the very spot where her photo used to sit, was a family Christmas portrait. No uniforms, no rank, no trace of who she'd been. She found her mother arranging deviled eggs and asked, casually, "What happened to my commissioning photo?" Margaret didn't even look up. "That old thing, it felt dated. Thought I'd put something more recent up." Her tone was breezy, but her eyes didn't meet Caroline's. They stared straight past like Caroline had become a shadow stretching over the tablecloth. Later, a cousin asked what Caroline was doing these days. Natalie answered before she could speak. She used to do some consulting. I think now she's probably retired or something. Someone else added with a chuckle. Office jobs are safer. Anyway, better than doing nothing. The laughter wasn't cruel. It was casual, dismissive in the way that stung deeper than open mockery. Caroline excused herself for a glass of water. That's when she heard it. A low voice, gravel-throated and firm. Hayes. Caroline Hayes. She turned. A retired colonel she couldn't quite place stood near the grill. His eyes sharp, posture rigid. I think I read your name on the Stonehaven directive. He said, hell of a plan. She nodded politely. I heard it had too many pages. Maybe, he replied, but it saved lives. He didn't say more. He didn't have to. That flicker of recognition, that brief moment in a backyard full of forgotten names, was enough to anchor her again. Her mind drifted, just briefly, back to that cold night in the war room. 12 Allied units had waited for her order. Intelligence said advance. Her gut said hold. She held. The enemy artillery struck minutes later, right where they would have been. 300 soldiers lived because of that call. But the mission was later deemed strategically misaligned, so she took the fall. Her name disappeared from the after-action report. The public commendations were quietly canceled. The press called it operational miscommunication. She remembered walking away with nothing but silence. Back at the backyard potluck, someone handed her a drink. Everyone else had name-etched tumblers: Natalie, Dad, Uncle Frank. Carolyn sipped from a plain white plastic cup. No name, no place. But she remembered, and she whispered to herself, sometimes honor doesn't come with a nameplate, but if someone speaks it aloud, let them. The next morning, before the house fully stirred, Caroline wandered through the living room. The air smelled faintly of leftover brisket and old carpet cleaner. The display cabinet stood like a shrine lined with medals, photographs, plaques, her father's service ribbons, her grandfather's black and white war portrait, Natalie's graduation plaque in polished glass. She didn't expect to find herself there, but she still looked. There was a square of lighter wood on one shelf, just a patch, like a picture frame had once hung there. Its absence was almost louder than if it had been thrown out. She opened the drawer beneath. Batteries, old coasters, and there it was, her West Point frame, still intact, still polished, but inside it was no longer her photo, just a stock filler image of a smiling couple from a photo lab, like she'd never existed at all. She held it in her hands and stared. Her mother hadn't thrown it away. That would have been too bold. She had just filed her away, like a decoration that didn't fit the new decor. Later, in the kitchen, Caroline asked, when did you take my picture out of the cabinet? Margaret stirred her tea, eyes fixed on the window. I was rearranging. Thought the wall needed some air. No one notices those things. Caroline nodded slowly. That's the point, she said. That night, over another dinner, Natalie beamed as she spoke of her upcoming promotion ceremony. A formal event, she said, held at a military dining hall near Pensacola, a place with a wall of honor. They'd put her photo up for the whole week. Their mother clapped gently. That sounds lovely. Dear Caroline, if you're coming, wear something simple. Nothing too attention-grabbing. Caroline smiled thinly. Sure, wouldn't want to steal the spotlight. She didn't say it aloud, but she'd once briefed generals in a war zone wearing dress blues and body armor, 12 time zones from that kitchen. And somehow, even her gray blouse tonight felt too loud for this room. That night, as she folded her clothes in the guest room, her phone buzzed. No name, just a number, one message. They're digging into Stonehaven. Old files resurfaced. Your name's in them. Be careful. She stared at the screen long after it went black. That name Stonehaven hadn't touched her lips in years, not since the day she was told to disappear. And now, The silence was cracking. The night before the promotion dinner, Caroline didn't sleep much. The old guest bed creaked with every breath she took, like it, too, resented her presence. She folded and refolded the same charcoal black dress until its seams felt memorized. The dining hall outside Pensacola looked every bit the part, walls lined with portraits of stern generals, polished floors reflecting every step, and a projection screen already cycling through Natalie's photos in uniform. Caroline arrived 10 minutes early, her wool coat brushing just above her knees, the kind of garment meant to blend in. At the check-in table, a young officer scanned the list, then her face. "And you're a guest of—" Before she could speak, Natalie appeared like a stage cue. "She's family," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Used to be admin support or something. She's just here for me." The hug that followed was more air than contact. Caroline didn't flinch. She had once stood through artillery briefings. She could survive this. Inside, the celebration was already humming. Patriotic bunting along the walls. Flags positioned just so. A long head table gleamed under overhead lights, crowded with officers, families, laughter, ceremony. Caroline's seat was off to the side. No nameplate, no mention. Just a folded napkin and a glass of water gone lukewarm. Then Natalie took the podium. She looked radiant, eyes clear, voice confident, every gesture controlled, her tone practiced but not cold. She smiled and began. "I want to share a quick story." Caroline braced. "When I was a kid," Natalie continued, "my sister once told me, 'Go ahead and try. I don't think I can keep up with you.'" Laughter drifted from the tables. A few people glanced at Caroline with that soft, patronizing sympathy reserved for washed-up mentors. Natalie's voice grew gentler. "That stuck with me. It's why I never gave up, even when it got hard." Caroline said nothing. She didn't blink. She wasn't going to become the sentimental footnote in someone else's origin myth. The ceremony moved forward. Citations were read. Medals were pinned. Glasses raised. The air buzzed with earned pride and an undercurrent of curated narrative. Then the door opened again. This time, the silence fell sharper. A man entered, dress blues tailored with precision, the insignia of the Pentagon gleaming on his chest. He paused, scanned the room like someone used to command presence, then moved. Natalie stepped forward. "Colonel Whitaker, sir." "I didn't know," but he didn't let her finish. His gaze locked onto Caroline. 7 even steps carried him across the room. Then, in full view of every officer present, he stood at attention and saluted. "General Hayes, ma'am," he said, voice cutting through the ambient hum. "It's been far too long." Forks froze. Napkins halted mid-dab. One officer near the back whispered, "General, is she really?" Caroline nodded once. "Colonel, good to see you again." Colonel Whitaker turned to the officers around him, his tone matter-of-fact. "This woman helped coordinate withdrawal routes during Operation Stonehaven. Half of NATO owes her their necks. Literally." Caroline didn't smile. She didn't need to. The truth filled the space like a flare. For once, she didn't have to defend herself. She only had to exist. Later. A young cadet approached her, nerves visible in his shoulders. "Ma'am, are you really a general?" Carolyn sipped slowly from the same plastic cup as always. No etched glass, no special insignia. "I once gave the order not to fire," she said quietly, "even when protocol said I could. There were children inside the zone." She tilted her head. "You tell me, what title does that earn?" He didn't respond. He didn't have to. Caroline left the dinner without fanfare. No hugs, no goodbyes. Just the cold air of a door that had opened by mistake. The next morning, she sat at the old desk in the guest room. The inbox blinked with a new message. Subject line Stonehaven brief. Urgent inquiry. The sender, Jonathan Reeds, an investigative journalist known for exposing what most would bury. General Hayes. It began. We've received a copy of a classified operations file related to Stonehaven. Your name appears in it, along with claims you authorized a maneuver resulting in civilian casualties. We're seeking confirmation or correction. Please advise. She read it twice. Then again, her hands didn't shake. They locked, like muscle memory had turned to stone. The Stonehaven campaign wasn't a failure. It was a trap, a loop of false intelligence, spun tight by someone who had been playing both sides. General Marcus Ellison, he was the intel chief then. She had challenged him during a closed briefing, flagged inconsistencies, recommended delay. But she was the only dissenting voice, one red light in a room of green. When the operation collapsed, they called it fog of war. She called it betrayal, and she took the fall. Caroline picked up the phone and dialed an old number. The woman who answered had once been the best analyst in a 10-country radius. Sarah McLennan, came the voice. It's me, Caroline said. I'm sending a file. I need you to check the metadata who accessed it last, and from where. Hours passed. The sun moved across the guest room like a slow accusation. Then her phone rang again. Caroline, Sarah said. Voice clipped. The leak originated from a National Guard device. IP address traces back to your sister's issued tablet, 2 years ago. Time stalled. Her vision didn't blur. It narrowed. She drove to Natalie's base without warning. Parked, walked in like she still wore a badge that meant something. She found her sister in the break room. Scrolling through her phone, Caroline sat down, slid a paper across the table. This is the trace, she said. Your device accessed the file. Natalie's eyes flicked to the page, then away, then back. She didn't deny it. I sent it, she said. Last year, her tone was tight, controlled. I was tired of the whispers, tired of living in your shadow even when you weren't here. I just wanted it gone. It didn't sting, not the way betrayals usually do. It felt empty, like a room already stripped of furniture. You think I don't know what it feels like to be erased? Caroline asked. The difference is, I never tried to erase you. Natalie blinked fast. Her voice cracked. I was wrong. I know that now. But even when you were gone, people still saw you. She paused. I just wanted to be seen first. They sat in silence. Not as soldiers, as sisters. Caroline finally stood. I didn't come here to reclaim anything. I came to keep the truth from being rewritten. She leaned forward. And if anyone thinks I'll let them turn me into a cautionary footnote, they've clearly never studied who I am. That night at the edge of the old Fort Lincoln base, Caroline and Sarah met in the decommissioned comms post. The servers were still operational if you knew where to look. Your access code still works, Sarah said, gesturing toward a dusty terminal. Caroline typed Wraith Row 7. The screen flickered. A single folder blinked red, review only. Inside it was an audio file, static. Then a familiar voice. You will reprioritize Sector Delta. I don't care what Langston says. Execute Strike Protocol 5A. Civilian risk noted acceptable. General Marcus Ellison, ordering a strike that bypassed protocol, ignored intel, and justified risk. That strike had cost innocent lives, and they had buried it under paperwork and her name. Sarah leaned in. If this goes public, he's finished. Caroline nodded, but the chill in the room wasn't from the air. The news was already leaking, and someone had traced it back to Natalie. Her sister now faced suspension, review, possible discharge. Caroline knew what had to be done. She walked into the guard counsel's office in full dress coat, medals tucked away, like memories she didn't need to wear. I gave the order, she said, calm. Captain Hayes accessed the file on my request. Any breach is mine. A lie, but not a betrayal, a shield. That night, something was off. Her temporary office at Cranebridge Academy had fresh pry marks at the door. Inside, the USB was gone. In its place, a single note. You think you're the only one who remembers how war works. At the bottom, a red stamp, an eagle clutching arrows, a seal she hadn't seen in a decade, belonging to a disbanded off-books unit tied to Stonehaven. She called Sarah, no answer. Texted, nothing. Security logs said Sarah left the base after 11 p.m. She never returned. Like fog, like ghosts. Caroline sat alone, watching the map on her wall. No troops, no tanks, just alliances shifting like fault lines. And she understood something for the first time. This war wasn't fought with weapons anymore. It was fought with silence. And silence had a cost. The next morning, the door to Caroline's office was sealed shut with dull gray tape and a federal notice. Temporarily sealed. Security protocol violation. No explanation. Just the kind of bureaucratic finality that spoke louder than any official reprimand. She didn't argue, didn't knock, just stood there for a few seconds, staring at it like it was a casket. Then her phone rang, unlisted, no name, just a voice, calm and too familiar. General Hayes, it said, still playing by the rules. I see. Caroline didn't respond. There are things better left buried, the voice continued. You back off. We forget this noise. You keep your safety, maybe even a sliver of your legacy. She hung up. She didn't need to ask who it was. Only one man offered threats with a polished smile. Marcus Ellison. By noon. Natalie appeared in the Crane Bridge parking structure, eyes locked and burning. Her uniform wasn't perfect this time. Her voice was, I found something, she said before Caroline could speak. You're suspended, Caroline reminded her. I know. That gave me time. Natalie pulled a small printout from her coat pocket. I checked the guard audit logs. I found the IP address that deleted the backup audio file. Caroline stared. That file could have exposed everything. I know, Natalie said. Her jaw was tight, but this time it wasn't me. She'd broken more than protocol to get that data. She'd broken rank and trust, but she hadn't flinched. I erased you once, Natalie whispered. I won't let them do it again. Caroline didn't hug her. She couldn't. If she did, she might have shattered. That night, an encrypted message appeared on her screen. No name, no subject. I'm alive. They're holding me at the old comms post south of Fort Lincoln. I have the data. Strix Runner is the key. It could only be Sarah. Caroline contacted Colonel Whitaker immediately. If anyone could navigate a breach without triggering alarms, it was him. Then she called Ethan Morales. The young cadet had a way of being in the wrong places at the right times and hearing exactly what mattered. She found him loitering by the elevator, pretending not to be listening. Ma'am, he asked calmly, do you think honesty needs as much planning as a strike op? Caroline studied him. Only when you believe victory's not worth your soul. He gave a slow nod and walked away. That boy, she thought, was either going to change the system or be eaten alive by it. Later that night, a new alert blinked across her terminal. A military summit had been scheduled in Arlington. 3 days out, Ellison confirmed on the roster. The summit was a high-level diplomatic affair. Public. Controlled. Ideal for rewriting narratives. He wouldn't show up to debate, he'd show up to erase. Whitaker forwarded her a tactical plan, his usual dark humor stamped across the subject line. In case of fire, light match, rear access, minimal surveillance, a defunct AV uplink hidden in the building's original broadcast system. Risky, but not impossible. Natalie volunteered before Caroline even asked. I'll be the inside, she said. They know I'm suspended. It won't look strange if I ask about reinstatement. She hesitated. I'll wear the badge. Mike, I want to do this right. Caroline looked at her sister for a long time. This time, Natalie wasn't here to steal light. She was trying to carry it. At 1600 hours, Natalie entered the building through the south gate. Her uniform was regulation, her ID badge standard, The small broadcast device was tucked inside the lining, hidden but reachable. Caroline waited in a van parked 3 blocks away, monitoring frequencies, fingers hovering above the uplink trigger. Inside the summit, Natalie moved through the crowd. General Ellison stood mid-circle, surrounded by officers and foreign dignitaries. His uniform gleamed, every decoration perfectly placed. He looked older, a little grayer but no less dangerous. He spotted Natalie, eyes narrowing just slightly. "Captain Hayes," he said, voice smooth. "You know why people like your sister are dangerous? Because they still think justice matters more than logistics." He paused. "I fed her false intel. Yes. You know why. Because clean wins make cleaner headlines." Caroline hit broadcast. His voice, every word, began pouring through the internal speaker system. 2 seconds, maybe 3, then static. The feed cut. Someone had found the uplink, severed it. Caroline jumped from the van, rerouting power, wires hot under her hands. Ethan was already at the relay box, wrenching it open. Then came the sound, sharp and close. A single shot. Ethan stumbled, clutching his shoulder. Caroline caught him before he hit the ground. Blood spread beneath his coat, but his eyes held. "Don't let them win with silence," he whispered. She tightened a strap around his arm, set him against the wall. Hands moving automatically, heart burning. This wasn't about vindication anymore. It was about truth or the absence of it. She returned to the van, reinitiated the backup broadcast. The system hummed, stalled, then caught. She leaned toward the microphone. "This is General Caroline Hayes," she said. "Once, I was labeled a nobody. Today, I carry a truth." Her voice didn't shake. "When power manipulates reports, soldiers die under false orders. Silence isn't strategy. It's complicity." She let the feed roll. Ellison's voice played again, clear, unbroken, his admission undeniable. Inside the summit, people turned, faces froze. Conversations died. They didn't shout, no handcuffs, just quiet steps as security approached Caroline and Natalie. They were led through a side corridor to a windowless room, no nameplates, just 4 chairs and too much light. Then Ellison entered. His expression was calm, but his hands pulsed white at the knuckles. "I'm offering you peace," he began. "A dignified retirement. Your cadets left alone. Your sister cleared. Your legacy preserved." Caroline didn't blink. "You still don't understand," she said. "I never fought for legacy." She stepped forward. "I fought for dignity, and you can't fabricate that." He laughed once, short, almost tired. Then the door opened. Colonel Whitaker entered first. Ethan followed, arm in a sling, but standing tall. Then Sarah, pale, thinner, but intact. She stepped forward and placed a small drive on the table. "Full logs," she said. "Relief fund diversions, voice orders, all of it, untouched." Ellison lunged. Natalie blocked him. Her stance was crisp. Her voice was steel. "I used to be afraid of you," she said. "Not anymore. I swore an oath to serve, not obey blindly." Security didn't hesitate. They didn't come for Caroline. They came for him. On their way out, a nurse intercepted her in the hallway. Ethan had collapsed, blood loss, more severe than expected. He survived, but he'd need weeks to recover. Caroline stood outside his ICU room, watching the rise and fall of his chest beneath tangled wires. "He's not built for this," the nurse said. "No," Caroline replied, but he understood it better than most. A week later, the Pentagon offered her reinstatement, strategic command, rank, power. She declined. She had seen the top of that ladder and the silence it demanded. Instead, she returned to Crane Bridge Academy, not because she couldn't rise, but because she finally understood where strength belonged. The headlines arrived fast. General Marcus Ellison arrested for falsifying military intelligence and operational misconduct. For the first time in years, her name appeared beside the truth, not beneath it. Caroline Hayes, key whistleblower, in Stonehaven cover-up. It didn't feel like a parade. It felt like breathing, after holding still for too long. Adarino Nomar, an internal hearing was held days later. Not public, just a quiet panel behind closed doors, same architecture, same stale air, and the same faces who once waved off Caroline's warnings, like they were nothing more than bad weather reports. She didn't wear full ribbons, no ceremony, no dramatics. She brought the truth. That was enough. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She didn't appeal to sympathy. She spoke plainly like someone who had carried consequences long enough to know their weight. I never meant to become a symbol, she said, but silence isn't neutrality, and I will never apologize for disturbing a peace built on denial. The verdict came down clear. Full restoration of rank and honors. No charges, public integrity provisions waive prosecution. Natalie received formal reprimand but retained active status. When they left the building, Caroline and Natalie didn't hold hands. They didn't cry, but they walked side by side, shoulders aligned, no longer orbiting opposite ends of the same wound. Caroline didn't return to her childhood home often, but she went once more. The air smelled the same. The living room hadn't changed, still too many family photos, arranged like a timeline that skipped a few inconvenient years. But something was different now. On the hallway shelf, where her photo had once been replaced, it had quietly reappeared. Her West Point image sat next to Natalie's graduation frame. No fanfare, no announcement, just a quiet rebalancing. Margaret stood nearby. No tears, no apologies. Her voice came quiet, almost unsure. I never knew love could be that silent and that cruel. Carolyn nodded. I'm not here to blame, she said. I'm here to lay it down. Her father, Edward Hayes, had been mostly quiet since the tribunal, but as she prepared to leave, he handed her a small wooden box, old, polished, heavy with intent. Inside was a letter, postmarked 3 weeks after she left active duty. His handwriting, never sent. I didn't know how to say I was still proud. It read, I didn't know if you wanted to hear it. She didn't read it there. She just folded it, tucked it inside her coat pocket close to her chest, where it belonged. Back at Cranebridge Academy, life moved without ceremony. No parades, no headlines on the walls, just cadets in motion and whiteboards waiting to be filled. But on the bulletin board outside the mess hall, someone had pinned a new photo. Caroline, Ethan, a handful of officers in training, arms slung over each other's shoulders, laughing like gravity had taken a day off. Beneath it, scrawled in thick black marker. She didn't fight for attention. She fought for attention to the truth. Caroline paused there longer than she meant to. Legacy, she thought, wasn't built by medals or orders. It lived in the lessons people chose to carry forward. The next morning, she walked into her lecture hall. No insignia on her collar, no spotlight, just a room full of sharp minds and questions still forming. She didn't open with tactics, didn't mention protocol. She told a story, her story, about a woman once labeled a nobody, about how that woman refused to accept silence as her legacy, about the war that didn't end on a battlefield, but inside a room where truth had been traded like currency. You won't always be believed, she said, but live so that when the truth rises, it knows your name first. One morning, Ethan walked in early. His arm was still in a sling, but his pace had steadied. He said nothing, just nodded and took his seat. After class, Caroline found a folded piece of paper on her desk. I used to think courage was a loud scream. It read, now I know it's the quiet truth spoken when no one's listening. She held the note for a long moment. That truth that was everything she had once forgotten. Natalie didn't return to her previous post. She declined the offer of reinstatement and instead joined a civilian intelligence watchdog. Small, underfunded, independent. Their mission to investigate abuses from within, Why, Caroline asked one afternoon. Natalie smiled. Because if anyone knows what it feels like to be betrayed by the thing you once served, it's me. Caroline didn't argue. She just nodded. They went together to the old command base weeks later. The building had been repainted, her name long gone from the door. But behind the parade yard, under a fading chestnut tree, they placed a small plaque. No rank, no name, just one line. For those who died unnamed, but never unnoticed. They didn't say much. Grief, when shared in truth, didn't need words. It lived in the stillness between breaths. The night before her final lecture of the term, Caroline received one last encrypted message. No name, no sender. Just 12 words the cracks haven't stopped, but now they know you're not alone. She didn't save the message. She saved the feeling. That feeling of once being erased, now becoming the reason someone had to rewrite history. That morning, the lecture hall was already half full before she arrived. She stepped in, let the door close quietly behind her. No sound, just silence thick with something sacred. She looked over the students, some tired, some wide-eyed, all waiting. She didn't speak of battle maps or threat matrices. She spoke of what came after. When silence becomes more dangerous than gunfire, she said, "You'll have to decide what you're willing to risk to speak." She walked slowly along the rows. This isn't a class about war. This is about what survives it, what gets rewritten, what gets erased, and what refuses to stay buried. She let the silence breathe. Sometimes the loudest victories don't sound like applause. They sound like breath you weren't sure you'd ever take again. That afternoon, she brewed coffee in the staff kitchen. Sunlight stretched across the classroom floor. The corridor echoed with measured footsteps. Cadets on their way to become something. There were no headlines now, just continuity, just quiet, and somehow, that was enough. She sat at her desk, the whiteboard behind her marked with two simple words in clean black ink. Moral intelligence, not tactics, not strategy, but the part of you that must survive every decision. One day, someone else would teach here, but for now this space, this truth, this quiet belonged to her, and this time, no one could take her name off the wall.